Let me tell you something, when a nation truly knows who it is and what it stands for, you cannot shake it. You cannot intimidate it. You cannot bend it. That is what sovereignty really means. And right now, the world is seeing a perfect example of this in India. Too often in global politics, smaller or even rising nations fall into the trap of being pulled into someone else's orbit. They are pressured, they are lectured, they are given choices that are not really choices at all. Either side with one power or risk being punished by another. But India is showing the world that there is another way, a stronger way. India is standing up and saying, we will not let anyone else write our script. We will decide our own future. Think about that. This is a country that has been tested again and again, from the days of colonial exploitation to the Cold War tug of war, and yet it refuses to be cornered. India is not afraid of the West, and it is not chained to the East. Instead, it is walking its own path, making its own decisions, and refusing to be treated as someone's pawn. And that is what has the world talking. Because when you have leaders like Trump or Putin, leaders used to commanding attention and demanding obedience, suddenly they are faced with a country that doesn't flinch, that doesn't cave, that doesn't need their approval. That kind of confidence stuns them because it reminds them that power is not only measured in weapons, or in wealth, or in influence, it is measured in the unshakable will to remain true to yourself. And let's be honest, the easy thing for India to do would have been to take the shortcuts, to align quickly with whichever side offered more benefits in the short term, to compromise its independence just to avoid confrontation. That's the route many nations take, because it feels safer in the moment. But safety without sovereignty is an illusion. It's nothing more than dependency wrapped in comfort. India knows this. India understands that the long road, the harder road, is the one where it stands firmly on its own 2 feet, no matter how much pressure comes from outside. And that, my friends, is what separates a follower from a leader on the world stage. Now, when people talk about sovereignty, some think it is about isolation. They think it's about refusing cooperation or rejecting friendships. But that's not it at all. True sovereignty is about engaging with the world from a position of strength, not submission. It's about saying, we welcome partnerships, but not at the expense of our dignity. We welcome trade, but not at the cost of our independence. We welcome cooperation, but only when it respects our terms. That is the kind of sovereignty that demands respect, because it cannot be bought, it cannot be bullied, and it cannot be silenced. India is showing that sovereignty is not just a political stance. It is a cultural and spiritual force. It comes from knowing your history, your values, your people, and carrying that identity proudly into the future. That is why no matter how much the world tries to push, India does not break. That is why no matter who raises their voice, India does not lower its own. This is not arrogance. This is confidence born from centuries of resilience, from struggles overcome, from sacrifices remembered, from dreams that belong to no one else but India itself. And I'll tell you something, when other nations see this, it changes them too. It plants a seed. It makes them wonder, if India can resist being controlled, why can't we? It inspires courage in places where fear has taken root, because sovereignty is contagious. One act of defiance against dominance creates ripples across the globe. And right now, India's example is proving that you don't have to choose between being respected and being independent. You can have both if you have the courage to demand it. This is the lesson that shocks leaders like Trump and Putin. They are not stunned because India has suddenly gained military strength or economic clout, though it has both. They are stunned because India carries itself with a quiet defiance that cannot be negotiated away. They are stunned because India does not tremble when they raise their voices. They are stunned because India is showing that in the 21st century, true power belongs to the nations that refuse to surrender their sovereignty. And so when you look at the world right now, you see many countries chasing approval, bending under pressure, trading their independence for convenience. But then you look at India and you see something different. You see a country that has learned the ultimate truth. You don't gain respect by asking for it. You gain respect by demanding it through your actions, your choices, and your resolve. That is why today India stands unshakable on the global stage. Look around at the world right now, and you'll see something very clear. It is divided into blocks, divided into camps, divided into rivalries where each side is trying to pull others into its corner. On one side, you have the West, led by America, demanding loyalty, demanding alignment, demanding that everyone march to its tune. On the other side, you have Russia and its allies, flexing their own strength, trying to build an opposing camp, and caught in the middle of this polarized world are dozens of nations who feel like they have no choice but to pick one master or the other. But then you see India, and suddenly the old rules don't make sense anymore. Because India isn't lining up behind one flag or another. India isn't being swallowed into someone else's power game. India is writing its own rules, and in doing so, it's redefining what balance of power really means. You see, balance of power in the past meant 2 or 3 giants throwing their weight around while everyone else scrambled to survive. That was the Cold War logic. But today, India is proving that balance of power doesn't have to be a battle between superpowers. It can be the rise of new forces that change the entire equation. It can be about refusing to be a pawn and instead becoming a player. And this is exactly what stuns figures like Trump and Putin. They are used to nations falling in line. They are used to giving ultimatums and watching countries fold. But India isn't folding. India is standing tall, engaging with everyone yet serving no one. That's a position of strength that rattles the old world order. Think about it, when India trades with Russia, it does so on its own terms, not because Moscow demands it. When India partners with America, it's not because Washington ordered it, but because it sees opportunity that benefits both. When India speaks on the global stage, it does not echo anyone else's talking points. It speaks for itself, and the world listens. This is what redefining the balance of power looks like. It is not about isolation, it is about independence. It is not about neutrality. It is about sovereignty in action. It is about being strong enough to shake hands with everyone without ever kneeling to anyone. And let me tell you, this takes more than military strength or economic growth. It takes a mindset, it takes courage. Because the easy thing to do is to join a camp and enjoy the protection of a powerful ally. But that also means you live under their shadow and your choices are no longer your own. India refuses that. India has chosen the harder path, the bolder path, the path where it walks into a room with global giants and still speaks as their equal. And that choice, my friends, is what shakes the foundations of this polarized world. Because when one country shows that it's possible to stand independent, it exposes the weakness in the old system. It shows smaller nations that they are not condemned to be pawns forever. It proves that power is not just about having the biggest army or the loudest voice. It is about having the clarity to know your own worth and the resolve to defend it. That's what India is demonstrating right now, and that's why the balance of power is shifting before our eyes. Do you think Trump or Putin like that? Of course not. They thrive in a world where others depend on them, where every nation looks toward them for direction. But when they look at India, they see something that challenges their entire playbook. They see a nation that doesn't bow to pressure, doesn't rush to please, doesn't compromise its future for temporary gains. They see a force that can engage with both sides and still stand apart. And that is what stuns them. That is what makes them realize that the balance of power is no longer in their hands alone. What's happening here is bigger than just India. It's about the rise of multipolarity, about a world that is no longer controlled by just 2 or 3 players, but shaped by many. India is the proof that this shift is real, that this century will not be dominated by a single narrative, but defined by many voices. And that, in the end, is healthier for the world, because when 1 or 2 powers dominate, everyone else suffers. But when there is true balance, true diversity of strength, then cooperation becomes possible, competition becomes fairer, and respect becomes mutual. This is why India's role matters so much. Because by refusing to be dragged into the polarization, India is forcing a new balance to emerge. One where nations are not trapped between East and West, but free to find their own destiny. One where respect is earned through strength of will, not through submission. One where the old giants are no longer the only voices that matter. So understand this, the balance of power is not something fixed. It is always shifting, always being rewritten. And right now it is being rewritten by India, a nation that is proving you don't have to choose sides to be strong. You just have to choose yourself. That is why today, the balance of power no longer belongs only to the few. It belongs to those bold enough to claim it. Let me tell you something. Dignity is not a word that gets thrown around much in politics. You hear about power, you hear about leverage, you hear about deals, but dignity, that's rare. And yet, that's exactly what India has shown to the world: strategic dignity. The kind of dignity that doesn't scream, doesn't posture, doesn't beg for attention. It's the quiet, unshakable confidence of a nation that knows its value and refuses to let anyone else define it. And when a country carries itself with that kind of dignity, it doesn't just defend its place on the map, it transforms the way others look at it. You see, Trump is stunned not because India shouted the loudest, but because it didn't need to. Putin is taken aback not because India threatened, but because it didn't have to. This is what true confidence looks like. It doesn't come from bluster, it comes from restraint. It comes from being able to stand across the table from the most powerful men in the world and say, without raising your voice, we will do what is right for us, not what you demand. That's the lesson India is teaching right now, that dignity in strategy is more powerful than arrogance in power. And let's be clear, this kind of confidence doesn't appear overnight. It is built over decades through sacrifice, through resilience, through refusing to let setbacks define you. India has been tested again and again, through poverty, through wars, through global pressures, and each time it has stood back up, stronger than before. That kind of history creates a mindset, a national spirit that says, we've been through worse, and we will not be pushed around now. That is where this dignity comes from. It's not just a choice. It's a reflection of identity. The world is used to nations bending under pressure. Some do it out of fear, others out of greed. But when you see a country refuse to compromise its principles even when cornered, that is when you see true leadership. India could easily take shortcuts, compromise for quick gains, or let others dictate its policies to avoid conflict. But it doesn't. It plays the long game. And that's why this lesson matters so much. Not just for India, but for every nation that is watching. Strategic dignity is about knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. It's about knowing that walking away from a deal that compromises your sovereignty is more powerful than signing an agreement that weakens your future. It's about understanding that respect is not granted to those who shout the loudest, but to those who stand the tallest without moving an inch. That is why the world is watching India with surprise and even admiration, because it is proving that dignity and confidence are not weaknesses in global politics, they are weapons. And this isn't just about governments, it's a lesson for people too. Because how many of us in our lives have been pressured to fit someone else's mold? How many times have we been told, if you want to succeed, you have to play by their rules? But when you have dignity, when you have confidence, you realize you don't need to bend to someone else's expectations to matter. You don't need their validation to prove your worth. You need to stand by your values, and in time they will respect you for it. That is exactly what India is doing right now on the grandest stage of them all. And make no mistake, Trump and Putin are not stunned because India has more weapons or more wealth than them. They are stunned because India is not afraid of them. They are stunned because India looks them in the eye and speaks as an equal, not as a subordinate. They are stunned because they see that India's power doesn't just come from its size or its economy, but from its self-belief. That kind of confidence cannot be bought, it cannot be forced, and it cannot be taken away. It is earned. What we are witnessing right now is a shift in how power is perceived. The old model said you needed to dominate to be respected. The new model The one India is carving out says you just need to hold firm to who you are, and the world will have no choice but to respect you. That's the brilliance of strategic dignity. It doesn't just protect sovereignty, it elevates it. It sends a message loud and clear. We don't need to shout to be heard. We don't need to kneel to be recognized. We don't need to follow to be respected. That is why the world is watching in amazement, because when a nation combines dignity with strategy and confidence with restraint, it cannot be ignored. It doesn't just play the game, it changes the game. That is why today, India's lesson in dignity and confidence is shaking the world's most powerful leaders to their core.